The speaker.
I just wanted to say good morning. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.
I'm so happy to see you.
Namaste.
Hi, Denise, hi, Martha, Monica, and everyone.
Namaste everyone. Welcome to International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women's program. I'm so glad and happy to be part of this event and hosting this event. Well Yoga community supporting all the women for their upliftment in the society. This year theme for the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women is Orange, the World Fund, Respond, Prevent and Collect. I'm wearing the orange. The United Nations General Assembly has designated November 25th as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, Resolution 54/134. The premise of the day is to raise awareness of the fact that women around the world are subject to rape, domestic violence, and other forms of violence. Furthermore, one of the aims of the day is to highlight that the scale and true nature of the issue is often hidden. For 2014, the official theme framed by the UN Secretary General's campaign, Unite to End Violence Against Women, is Orange Your Neighborhood. I remember all of us were there to celebrate that day. Historically, the date is based on the date of the 1960 assassination of the three Mirabel sisters. Political activities in the Dominican Republic. The killing were ordered by Dominican dictator Rafael Trujillo. Three of the four sisters, Patria, Minerva, Maria Teresa, were assassinated on November 25, 1960. The late sister Dede died on natural causes on February 1, 2014. In 1981, activists at the Latin American and Caribbean feminist encuentros marked November 25th as a day to combat and raise awareness of violence against women more broadly. On December 17, 1999, the date received its official United Nations resolution. The UN and Inter-Parliamentary Union have encouraged governments, international organizations, and NGOs to organize activities to support the day as an international observance. For example, UN Women, the United Nations entity for gender equality and the empowerment of women, observes the day each year and offers suggestions for other organizations to observe it. For 2014, the focus is how to violence cuts across all 12 of the critical areas of concern of the Beijing Declaration and platform for action, which turns 20 next year. The woman is celebrated as the most powerful and the empowering force in some Hindu Upanishads, Shastras and Puranas, particularly the Devi Upanishads, Devi Mahatma and Devi Bhagavata Purana. Ancient and medieval era Hindu texts present a diverse picture of duties and rights of women in Hinduism. The texts recognize 8 kinds of marriage, ranging from father finding a marriage partner for his daughter and seeking her consent, Brahma marriage, the regular marriage in India, to the bride and groom finding each other without parental participation, Gandharva marriage or the love marriage. Scholars state that Vedic Hindu texts and records left by travelers to ancient and medieval India suggest that ancient and early medieval Hindu society did not practice dowry or sati. These practices likely became widespread sometime in the 2nd century from socio-political developments in the Indian subcontinent. Throughout history, Hindu society has been many female rulers such as Rudrama Devi, religious figures and saints such as Intl, philosophers such as Maitreyi, and female conductors of Vedic Hindu rituals. Hinduism has the strongest presence of the divine feminine among major world religions from ancient times to the present. The goddess is viewed as central in Shakti and Shaiva Hindu traditions. Matriarchal theology is quite prevalent in Sanskritic traditions and village Hinduism related to the worship of Shakti, and there are numerous Hindu communities that are matriarchal. I know my mother was ruling my family. So we have the matriarchal nature in our family. No man, even in anger, should ever do anything that is disagreeable to his wife. For examples, joy, virtue, and everything depend on the wife. Wife is a sacred soil in which the husband is born again. Even the rishis cannot create men without women. This is not my word. This is from Mahabharata, Adi Parva, the first chapter. The Devi Sukta hymns of 10th chapter in Rig Veda, a scripture of Hinduism, declares the feminine energy as the essence of the universe, the one who creates all matter and consciousness, the eternal and infinite, the metaphysical and empirical reality, Brahman, the soul, supreme self of everything. They say it this way: I am the queen, the gatherer up of treasures, most thoughtful, first of those who merit worship. Thus, gods have established me in many places with many homes to enter and abide in. Through me alone, all eat the food that feeds them. Each man who sees, breathes, hears the word outspoken. They know it not, yet I reside in the sense of the universe. Here, one and all, the truth as I declare it. I verily myself announce and utter the word that gods and men alike shall welcome. I may the man I love exceeding mightily make him nourished, a sage and one who knows Brahman. I bend the bow of Rudra, that is narrow my strike, and slay the hater of devotion. I rouse and order battle for the people. I created earth and heaven and reside as the inner controller. On the word summit, I bring forth the Father. My home is in the waters in the ocean. Thence I will be the present in all existing creatures as the inner supreme self and manifest them with my body. I created all words and at my will without any higher being and permeate and dwell within them. The eternal and infinite consciousness is I. It is my greatness dwelling in everything. Like in previous years, this year International Day will mark the launch of 16 days of activities that will conclude on 10th December 2020, which is International Human Rights Day. And Reverend Doyeon will mention about this. Here I admire and applaud all people who are helping to promote elimination of violence against women and educate, enforce laws, and change people's mindsets. Additionally, we should remember all those divine souls who help victims to heal and become agents of social change. In my personal level, I say, I had great time with female around the world. Often I had hard time too. But I take it as a positive way. We all should work together. Wherever we see a drawback, we had to fill in and fix it and move on. We cannot stay back. Here, I want to present our Emcee for the day, Reverend Denise Scotto, Esquire. She is the chair for the Committee of International Day of Yoga, and she has so many hats. Reverend Denise, floor is for you.
Thank you so much, Guruji. Thank you for setting some of the context for us with the history of the UN resolution and how this day came to pass, and for briefly touching upon some of what many of us who have been involved in this area of law for many years know as harmful traditional practices that you mentioned. I extend a very, very warm thank you, because this is a form of partnership and collaboration. Guruji and I were on a call with the URI UN office, and I just mentioned briefly that this day, November 25, was coming up, just to put it in our consciousness and to hold it in that space, in our minds and in our hearts. And then Guruji just said, hey, how about us having a meeting? We can do a Zoom meeting and celebrate this day together. So it's not about women ruling the world and women taking over the world. It's how can we, men and women, boys and girls, come together as human beings? How can we work for the best for everybody to create a world, as we know in the UN, that works for all? One where there is respect for each other, respect for human dignity, respect for the values that we have in our differences, yet having equality for each and every person. The UN has a very long history in its foundational documents of this concept of equality of men and women. So we have a very strong bedrock, which really going forward gave rise to many documents that brings up the equality between men and women. And in the UN system, there are many different mechanisms in place, starting from the founding of the UN and with the creation of the Commission on the Status of Women, that really took a lot of time and energy and focus to take a look at the systemic and ingrained structural and cultural beliefs that really have power dynamics where women are subordinate to men in many ways. Before we get into that, and there's a lot that we can speak about, I want to acknowledge that our Reverend Doyan from the UN Church Center for the United Nations sends her regards, and that she's unable to join us today. But I acknowledge her as such a strong supporter of human rights and such a strong pillar of strength for so many in the UN community, because she has brought together women and men to promote the rights, the values, the respect, the dignity of women and girls globally around the world. And she has held space and made space in the chapel of the Church Center for us to get together around so many events, around so many causes. And she has really held a lot of space around sexual violence of women, and also the idea of missing women and missing girls, in the sense of the girls who were kidnapped in Nigeria and who remain with their captors and not with their families. So I do want to acknowledge her and thank her for all the work that she's done to bring these communities together and to always have the real high aspiration and the action to fulfill the human rights of women and girls, working together with men and boys. So thank you, Reverend Doyan. You're with us today in our hearts and in our minds and with this energy. And for those of you who are joining in through our Facebook live streaming, a very warm welcome to you too. Please feel free to write things in the chat and share with us, because today is a day for all of us to get together and to celebrate. Many people here today who are the speakers that you see, if you've seen the flyer, are people who are real colleagues but became friends because of our decades-long work together and our decade-long holding the values of human dignity and human respect. And how can we really create that in the world where we live with what is so? So we'll hear from people from all different perspectives, and we will also acknowledge the different ways that we can make a difference. For many people, you know me as being involved with the Yoga Day Committee, but also many people know me for years working as an attorney on advocacy issues for human rights and on the rights of women and girls. And I started my career back in the 1990s when the Rwandan genocide was going on, and how the women and girls were systematically raped. Rape is a war crime, ethnic cleansing, forced pregnancy, kidnapping of girls to be sex slaves. This is something that really tore at my heart, and I thought, how can this be happening in today's day and age when we have all this international law that's going on? To make the long story short, that led me to work in the UN, to work in, at one point in my career, the UN Division for the Advancement of Women. And this Division for the Advancement of Women was an institution in the UN well before UN Women. UN Women celebrated a big anniversary, but when UN Women was established, it brought together the Division for the Advancement of Women, it brought together UNIFEM, it brought together INSTRAW, and it brought together the Office of the Special Advisor on Gender Issues across the UN system. And it consolidated all of these organizations or UN entities into UN Women. So many of us on this call today who are speaking not only know the history, but we've lived it and we've witnessed these changes. And I've said we've worked together for decades. In my capacity as an attorney and as someone who's worked in the UN system on these issues, I've had the incredible privilege to meet so many powerful, strong, caring, compassionate women who have made great strides and great changes in the world to make it a safer world for everyone, not just women and girls, to make it a safer and better world for our environment. And I can think of two Nobel Peace Laureates who completely come to mind, Wangari Maathai, who's the founder of the Green Belt movement in Kenya, and also Nadia Morad, who's a Goodwill ambassador and who is a Yazidi who was a survivor of that genocide and a survivor of being a sex slave. The issues that we talk about in terms of violence against women are very broad, yet some of them remain to this day. As I said, the Rwandan genocide and what's happening with the Yazidi community still has not changed much, though we have an international criminal court. We have many UN Security Council resolutions that deal with the situation of civilians, women, children in armed conflict and in war. So my deep belief is that the law is important. We need the law to be in place to say, this behavior is not acceptable. This is not how human beings act. This is not something that societies tolerate. But yet we know that things still continue to go on and that the law takes us only so far. Underneath this, I believe, is a real change in people's minds and hearts. And if you want to call that a spiritual change, then you can call it a spiritual change. But for me, it's a change in human consciousness to acknowledge that we are human beings and that we are born, men and women, boys and girls, with the same human dignity and the same value. Women are not chattel or property of men. How can they be? If we take a look at it from a spiritual perspective, and our speakers will definitely bring up these points and elaborate on them in a more articulate way than I am, we know that if we use the term God or that supreme absolute being creative force is blind, creates everything from a place of love and looks at everything in an equal way from a place of beauty. My hope today is that we unite our minds and our hearts and that we're open to understanding the difficulties that women and girls face that men don't because of their sex, of being a woman or being a girl, and the different forms of violence that we face and have faced, and how there are mechanisms in place, but yet at how the same time it goes beyond that and it goes to our shared values. And we heard a lot from Guru Dileep about some of these shared values that are yogic values. And these values that we do find in the UN, in our foundational instruments, again, and in the vision of the UN and in the spirit of the UN. Again, it goes to human dignity and respect. It goes to equality, fairness. It goes to justice. It goes to harmony. It goes to unity, and it goes to oneness and solidarity and our interdependence. There are many other things that we can speak about, but I like just to set the stage now at this broad context, and I'd like to bring up a few points. When I was working in the UN system, we did a special Secretary General report on violence against women. And this was released in the year of 2006, so well over 10 years ago. And this report showed, and it continues to show in the data that's been done since 2006, that 1 out of 3 women or girls experience violence at least at one point in their lifetime. And the most common form of violence that women and girls around the world experience is domestic violence, or what we also call intimate partner violence, or violence in the home. And we know from the data that's been taken since COVID-19 started that there has been an alarming rise of violence against women and girls in this kind of situation due to the lockdown of over 90 countries. And the data shows that in some countries that the violence against women and girls has increased by 40%. The Secretary General himself has remarked that this is incredibly alarming and disturbing and is unacceptable. And in his call for a global ceasefire of all violence that's happening in the world, in order to open up corridors so that we can have better humanitarian assistance, he's also calling on a ceasefire in the home for greater protection for women and girls, and for increased services for governments to implement funding as well as services like shelters and hotlines, as well as delivery of food and medical treatment. So we have a very complex situation, because we know it's not just that easy when we talk about domestic violence. We have the overlay of the pandemic, but women also experience many multiple forms of violence, from their race to their religion, to their age, to their education. It goes on and on and on. And my hope today is to bring some of these issues out, the way Guru Dileep brought out and just briefly touched upon the harmful traditional practices. We know that these exist and they've continued to exist. We know that there's harassment in the workplace. We know that there's a lot that deals with income inequality, and the list is endless. We know that technology has given rise to newer forms of violence, cyber violence and cyber stalking and using cell phones. We could go on and on and on, but we want to be hopeful, and we want to put out up in front our vision so that we reduce and eventually eliminate violence against women and girls, because we appreciate each and every person for the dignity of their human beingness, for their birthright of being born as a human person, free and equal, as we quote the UN documents. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. And our first speaker is someone who I know for many years. We met, I believe it was probably, I think, in the UN cafeteria. I was working in the UN at the time, and she invited me to a coffee. And then we started speaking, and at that time I was very involved with the UN Division for the Advancement of Women, with the Commission on the Status of Women, with the CEDAW Committee of Experts, because the CEDAW Committee of Experts and the treaty body was meeting in New York at that time. It was before it became part of OHCHR. And also, I had just finished working with Angela King, the Special Advisor on Gender Issues and the Advancement of Women in the UN System, on UN Security Council Resolution 1325. So I'm going to invite Dr. Minnie Murthy to join us today. She's someone who has been a strong advocate for the rights of women and girls for years. For human rights across the board, she's a well-known author. She wrote a book on women's human rights that was released. She has many articles that she's penned, including op-eds. She's been on high-level panels, including with Dr. Fauci. She's won many, many awards. She's the first as an Indo-American to receive such prestigious awards with different medical associations. It's my great pleasure to introduce one of our executive board members of the Yoga Day Committee, Dr. Minnie Murthy. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Now, first of all, thank you so much, Denise. Thank you, Guruji. Hi, everybody. And, it's nice to see old friends and, oranging everything. And I just wanted to say that before I started, Denise, thank you so much for your remarks, and you, Guruji, because this is ironic. Women in so many cultures are, thought to be great, but they are still abused. That is really a paradox, and that's what we need to address. And I think some of you were on the program which just happened with the UN Women and UNFPA hosting it. It was a very powerful program. And Denise, it brought me back to the time when we met Nadia Murad in the UN chamber, when this young woman was there, and then she had all of us spellbound. And later on, we came to know that, years later, that she got the Nobel Prize. And I just wanted to say something, not to bring politics here, but there is a statement by the President-elect Joe Biden, which was just released on the International Day of Elimination of Violence Against Women. And I just wanted to say that he is committed as the incoming president and his administration to address violence against women at all levels, and especially among women service members. Because as we know, our armed forces, the women serving in armed forces have so many issues. So I just wanted to bring that. And he also—
If I can just interject, Minnie, thank you for bringing that up, because in the US, Joe Biden is very well known for passing the Violence Against Women Act. This is incredible legislation that he passed over 25 years ago, which has really given rise to so many other laws and policies in the US to try to create gender parity. So without continuing, Minnie, the floor is back to you. I just wanted to give the plug.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because, just this morning, I saw this and I said, I just want to, spend like a minute talking about it. And especially now with COVID, we know that violence against women is increasing. And so in my remarks here, I would like to highlight what I have seen as a physician and a public health provider. So many times women come, like I always tell my medical students and interns, that when a woman keeps coming to you at the emergency room, don't think, and then she says like, I've fallen down the stairs or I've walked through the door. I said, how can she walk through the doorknob hitting her? Unless like she's like 4 feet something and the knob is right at her level, and you don't walk through the door. So this is something we all need to understand. When somebody is telling us something, they want to hide it, because a lot of times, as we know, women are ashamed because it's the culture of silence. But we as women, as men, because in the spelling of woman is man. So we need to work together to address this issue. And the other thing I want to tell you is, so many times women come because they don't have access to healthcare, which is against violence. Immunization rates in some countries are lower among girls compared to boys because the parents think it is a waste of time to get the girls immunized. And coming to that, I just want to talk very briefly about why cervical cancer is which is a preventable disease, can be considered as one of the other aspects of gender-based violence, because the girls are not immunized. As we know, we have a pretty effective vaccine against HPV, without becoming too technical, which can prevent cervical cancer in not only young girls, but also in boys. Studies have proved that. But a lot of times the girls don't have access to this because the parents don't want them to. They are denied. And I have seen, as a practicing physician, so many times when women walk through the door, even before they're examined, you know they have cervical cancer in an advanced stage, because unfortunately they are smelling so bad. What is preventable by a pap smear before and a vaccine? You see, this is neglect. So neglect also is a form of violence against women and girls. And also lack of safe motherhood, lack of access to safe motherhood. Women are, delivering in the most difficult circumstances because all the stakeholders at all levels have not made women's health issue a priority. And let me tell you, even here in the United States, unfortunately, so many obstetric wards had to close down because of lack of funding. So in order to address gender equity, promote gender harmony, and look at how we can attain SDG, which is health for all at all ages, especially when it comes to women and girls. It's even more important that we address this at all levels, whether it is funding, whether it is access, whether it is education, whether it is empowerment, or having policy makers accountable. Because the whole thing here is the perpetrators of violence against women need to be held accountable, which is easier said than done. And it is so sad that why is it only 16 days of activism? We should have activism every day, the 365 days of the year, to promote this heinous crime against women and girls. I'm not saying boys and men are not abused, but the proportion of girls and women being abused is so much more. Denise, you just said that 1 in 3 women is abused. When you worked on this report with your colleagues almost 14, 15 years ago, unfortunately, it's 2020 and the numbers have not been changed. So this is the main issue. And I just want to spend the last 2 minutes talking about the impact of COVID, because COVID, not only has it caused so much of misery, death, and suffering, but it is a pandemic within a pandemic. It is the shadow pandemic which is looming, because women often have lost the support system they have. They cannot access any outside resources. So that's why the UN agencies are partnering with the private sector in promoting, in helping them to access resources when they need it. One example is banks. The local banks are working with women. And then we also have the local pharmacies which are working. So all this, this is a partnership. One person cannot change it. It's just not the UN doing it. It's the civil society, it's the private sector, it's academia. And, I apologize if I sound redundant, but there was a very interesting, I would say, comment made by the chairman of the World Bank Group earlier today. He said that the World Bank will not do any business with any contractors if there are reports of sexual violence against their women employees. And he said for 2 years they would be blacklisted. And he also called upon the other partner UN agencies and other partners who work with the World Bank, including the private sector, to put this into practice. So we need people like this, because we need to take a stance. We need to make sure that, this does not happen. And the last thing is the effects of GBV are so horrific. They go on for a number of years. Denise, you know that, all our other, esteemed panelists are aware, but it's just not the physical effects, it's also the psychosocial and the mental effects. And to conclude, as we all know, the WHO states that that health is a complete state of physical, social, and mental well-being. Unfortunately, we cannot achieve the complete state of health for anybody if we neglect more than half of the population. So thank you so much. Namaste. And I think we should all our real Thanksgiving begins when we see the numbers drop from not 1 to 3, but maybe 0. So thank you all. It's such a privilege. Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Guruji.
Thank you, Dr. Murthy. We appreciate you bringing out some of the newer initiatives that are going on. As you said, the head of the World Bank just spoke about this earlier today in the special UN event. So that's important to share with other people, because I don't think that's as well known as some of the other initiatives. I think many of us know about the 16 days, that global campaign that was started with Charlotte Bunch years ago with the Center for Women's Global Leadership. That's been one where many civil society members have rallied around. And the Unite campaign, as you know, we were all there. And that's another one that I think has gotten a lot of attention, because some of the celebrities who have been involved and who are promoting it. One of the things that I do want to say is the color orange is used for the Unite campaign. And that's a color which is one that is an emotional color. It's a color which provides hope. That's really the reason why orange was chosen. Something that is so very much that you cannot miss it. It's right there because it's so bright, that it just radiates that kind of vitality. So orange was chosen really as a means of giving hope to people and to give hope for better days ahead. So that's just a little tidbit. And prior to that, UNIFEM used to give out scarves. And I don't know how many of you remember, but they used to give out beautiful blue scarves for Women's Day, but also for the day that we're celebrating today, calling attention to eliminate violence against women and girls. And when the whole situation really came to a fore with Afghanistan back in the late 1990s, at that time when the lawyer Jirga was being established, that's when many people started wearing the light blue scarves at the UN, because that was a symbol of solidarity for Afghan women. And that's another big color to wear when we speak about women's rights too in the UN system. Actually, that's more of a historical perspective. I think now today, it seems like orange has overtaken that. And for us old timers, we remember the light blue. But I want to turn my attention now to someone who has been such a staunch advocate at the UN for many decades too, someone who I remember meeting when I was a real newbie, and someone who has given such great inspiration is Monica Willard. She has been so steadfast in her support of the UN spirit and upholding the UN vision. Someone who, as you know, part of URI, who is just really beautifully brought together many, many different groups of people from around the world in the many circles, the cooperation circles, and I think is really an example of bringing a practice of cooperation as a practice together, uniting people in this special practice around creating a better world. And we've also been very active for years with the Commission on the Status of Women, with different panels there, having spiritual leaders come, but also having a special service that Reverend Doyan has also made space for us at the chapel for the church center, which really is about having remembrance of those women who have come before us and whose shoulders that we stand on, those women who were at the fore of really calling for the solutions that we do have, some of those solutions that we do have today to create a more balanced and equal footing for women, to try to close the power dynamic. So it's been my real great pleasure to really know Monica as a colleague and a friend, and I turn the floor over to you, Monica Willard.
Denise, I just thank you very much for your kind words and for the framework. Guruji, you set this day up and you did it in a short period of time. And the framework that has been established before my time now speaking has just been excellent. We are in a very big shadow pandemic of violence against women with COVID. That is what the Secretary General called it. And we need to take this subject very, very seriously. So I want to share with you what I did. And I lit a candle to keep in my heart and to bring to you the people who are suffering today, those who have died from violence, gender-based violence, and those that we need to be inspired today to take this light with us so that this does not stay at 1 in 3. Going to 0 is what we need to do. Absolutely. Thank you for that wonderful goal. And I think we've said it here on this call. As we carry the spirit of what has impacted so many people, I turn to the 16 days and I think of some of the history within URI. We had a woman in the Netherlands, Annie Inman, who had spoken so much about the day to eliminate violence for women. You have to take this on. URI does the International Day of Peace. We have to take this on. And unfortunately, at that point in time, I was really thinking of Thanksgiving and other things. And so it hadn't been something that I took into my heart as much as I have been over the years for violence throughout the year. But it was Guruji who put me on to really looking at this. And when I started examining the 16 days and taking it seriously, one of the things that has been requested of people is to hold conversations, to recognize the invisible, to help us bring us out of the shadow, to make it safe for people to share either their stories. And I imagine that as we saw that Me Too hashtag, there was more than one of us who talked to a friend. And I said, gee, aren't we lucky we didn't have to do this? And she said to me, maybe you were. And that's the first time that I had realized someone near and dear to my heart had been abused. So we need to think about what we can do as women, as men, to change not only the appreciation of people who have been wounded and to address them perhaps with a little bit more tenderness, but to also really say, this is ridiculous, it needs to stop, and it has to stop in our houses. It has to stop as anyone going to talk to a religious leader who's telling them about being abused and them saying, go back to your husband, without any change, without any acknowledgement. We must look and take advantage of the laws that are there. when I looked at why the 16 days were established, it was to look at this between the Day for the Elimination for Violence Against Women and Human Rights Day. And let us put into our heart and mind to know that gender-based violence, violence against women, is one of the greatest human rights abuses around the world. Every country, every economic, socioeconomic status, it exists, whether it exists verbally, physically, mentally, traditionally. I got involved in the UN in the 80s when I heard someone talk about having gone to Nairobi for the women's conference there. And she talked about FGM. And female genital mutilation wasn't even something I knew about in 1980. I'm a grown woman. I had never, ever heard the term and knew what it meant. And even when we know terms, we sometimes don't recognize the implications. Many of us have known that people get raped all across the board. But I didn't even realize the impact of what that meant on slaves. This was a way to produce more slaves. Did it ever cross my mind? We don't talk about those kinds of things. And there's so much about the stigma about violence against women that absolutely prevents us from holding us deep in our hearts, to keeping them in our prayers, but to also standing up in solidarity. I proudly have on my orange scarf today and glad to see others with it too, because I know that this is not something that is going to go away without addressing it. We talk about building back better. We need to shine a light on it in every place possible. There is not a little girl that calls for incest. It is wrong, it is immoral, it should be spoken about. No one deserves to be raped, whether they are having problems, whether they put themselves into situations, or if they are drugged or drunk. It is against the law, and we need protections. We need to have the safety for people to be able to say, this happened to me. I am not a bad person just because it happened. I can live, I can make it up. And I would like to tell you just a couple of stories. One was this morning when we were talking about this on an earlier call in URI, and they were talking about child marriage and how in Pakistan it went to court because the person said this 44-year-old could marry this 13-year-old because he had the papers. Well, the papers were falsified. This was a 13-year-old girl who'd been married off, and sometimes with the permission of people's parents and other times through kidnapping. There are issues going on in our society that we need to change, and we must change the mindset of men and boys as well as the mindset of women who are suffering and suffering silently because they don't know what to do. I thank every program who puts out numbers for calls. I thank every person who's working at this time to protect people in shelters, because it's not easy to be a frontline worker in this type of issue to begin with, but to do it during a pandemic makes it that much harder. So we have a challenge in front of us. We can offer our prayers, but let us do one thing from this conversation, and that is take it a step further. Follow it with someone else. Talk about today being the day for the elimination of violence against women, and think about the next 16 days. And maybe contact 16 people, maybe contact one, but do something during this 16 days that takes this webinar into your heart, into your life, and into your kitchen table. So I thank you. And for those who will be celebrating Thanksgiving, let us give thanks for the awareness and the courage that people have to face. Oh, I want to say one more thing. If you want to hear an amazing story about someone who had been captured by the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, I invite you to go to the URI website and scroll down to the visionaries, because it talks about our cooperation circle working with the survivors in northern Uganda and what it has meant to be able to bring people together when they have been so violated, to help add not just economic security by giving them training, but to give them, the most important part has been to give the camaraderie, the support, and the spiritual nourishment to continue in the face of severe degradation. So I thank you for this opportunity, and I encourage us to carry on this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica, for such a moving and comprehensive way of addressing the issue and speaking from your heart. I really feel your words so deeply, and I appreciate the way you touched upon some other harmful traditional practices like child marriage, as well as female genital mutilation. And these things are still going on. There are some laws in different countries on the books. We have law in the CEDAW Treaty for those countries that have ratified it, which makes it unacceptable practices. But again, it's the challenge of letting people know about that. We call that legal literacy. But once we have that, it's about, I think, understanding with a heart about how and why these are unacceptable behaviors and actions to take. The other thing that I think you really brought out beautifully, piggybacked on what Dr. Murthy said, is about the stigma that women and girls face and the code of silence that goes along with it. And you may be dealing with a friend for years and not even realize that that woman has had an experience of some sort that has really shaped her and has caused such tremendous trauma in her life that she's still dealing with and facing, you know? So absolutely, one of the things that I think is important to understand is it's not just about law, and a lot of it is also about how can people heal? How can girls heal? How can women heal, you know, on these multi-levels? I think, as Dr. Minnie Murthy said, psychosocial services are so critical to attaining the best optimal state of health, which goes beyond the physical form, right? And that's what we talk about when we talk about these underlying yoga principles. You know, it's the integral being, right? And it's about how we, you know, are beings that are beings of pure energy and light. And that goes so far beyond the physical form. So I so appreciate it. And I have a feeling that our next speaker is going to provide another rich, insightful intervention for us. And it's been my great delight to get to know Julia Grindon Welch from the UN Brahma Kumaris office. We knew each other peripherally, and I remember thinking, wow, because she helped to organize the special anniversary of the UN that happened some years ago now. And after that, we got a chance to know one another through our promotion of human rights, and really about the values of promoting human rights and the values that each person has. And she really helped to clarify my understanding of human dignity and what that means to be a human being. So without further ado, Julia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a beautiful welcome, Denise and Guruji, for hosting us today. And I have to say, it's just lovely to see so many faces, so many beautiful faces that I have known through the years. I'm looking at Monica here, and of course also Dr. Murthy, and many of you. So it's really lovely to be with you all. And as Denise inferred, that I'm going to be talking more from a spiritual perspective in terms of the empowerment of women and what we can do to eliminate violence against women. And I mean, I really appreciated what the other speakers said, and the passion and the love and the care that each one has shown through their words, and I can really feel that it's coming from their hearts. So as many of you were saying, that we know that today is the start, it marks the start of the 16 days of activism, the Unite campaign, which of course, as we know, is managed by UN Women. And that it's going to be, during these 16 days, galvanizing support in response to this pervasive and under-resourced critical issue. There's no doubt that these resources are urgent and needed. And this year has been like no other, as many of us have said, for so many reasons, including the COVID pandemic, divisiveness of discrimination, and recklessness around our natural environment. During these times, violence against women has intensified, and I was hearing, I think it was Denise who was saying that it's 40% worse this year. There are many different ways, again, as some of you have said, that violence is manifested psychologically, physically, sexually, emotionally, and spiritually. At work, there's discrimination where women receive less salary for the same job as men. In the streets, especially now during the pandemic, when they are more deserted, women are harassed and abused. As we were hearing, in their homes, because they may be trapped in their home with the perpetrator and not able to get sufficient help. Even educationally, in many areas of the world, women do not have access to proper education, and they are not empowered to participate in political fields. These too are manifestations of violence. Women have the same potential in all areas of life, and that potential has to be nurtured and encouraged rather than suppressed. So how can we access resources that will leverage this needed transformation that we were all speaking about today? How can we change our awareness and attitude towards one another to where everyone counts, is valued and empowered? It is important that we unite to find and bring all resources and innovative ways together to leverage actions to eradicate this violence. Many resources, such as legal, as Denise has been brought out so clearly, financial and social, are in place, but can sometimes be hard to come by. And when we experience a lack, this leads to increased feelings of fear, frustration, and powerlessness. However, we do have resources available to us, but they are often overlooked or underused. These are our inner resources. Inner resources are values, virtues, principles, strengths, and personal powers that help us to live our lives in a more effective and enjoyable way. Although most people draw on these inner resources daily to some degree, without being consciously recognized, nurtured, and utilized, inner resources often remain buried deep within the uncharted territory of the individual. The focus of the Brahma Kumaris is to draw out these inner resources, which are transmitted from the inner self through the spiritual trajectory of awareness, vision, attitude, and action. Or, seen in another way, from innate virtues, we develop principles that guide the way we live our lives and inform our actions. We believe these inner resources are the bedrock on which a new way of being and relating in the world rest. A world where all women and girls are elevated to an equal level with men, empowered, safe, and flourishing, free from, as many of you said, shame. Through contemplation and inner silence, supported by wisdom, we can reawaken the awareness that there is a spiritual power which is not passive, but a peaceful power that can create big transformation in ourselves and as a society. To bring out spiritual love in a new way, to relate to each other with equality, respect, dignity, and trust. I was asked to share a couple of current initiatives that the Brahma Kumaris are doing to support and enhance the resilience of women. To put that in context, the Brahma Kumaris is the largest spiritual organization in the world led by women. Of course, we do have men and boys in our organization, but it's an organization that is led by women. And until recently, it was led by Daddy Janki, who some of you know, who just left us at 104. During this period of time, during the COVID lockdown in June and July of this year, we offered a series of online workshops called Strategies to Create a Peaceful Mind in Times of Uncertainty. And these workshops included such things as experiencing a safe space within and coming back to center, harnessing the energy of the mind positively, free from waste, harmony in relationships, navigating change, adjusting to loss and moving forward, recharging the self and acting from a place of strength, and creating routines to support and sustain the self and integrate into our daily lives. And as a follow-up to these workshops, on December the 1st, which is next Tuesday, we're going to be hosting an event called A New Focus, Emerging Shakti for Our Current Times. I know Guruji mentioned Shakti in his introduction. This is where we will be exploring the sacred feminine power of Shakti. Shakti is a power originating from divinity, which is awakened through the practice of contemplation and inner silence. We believe that the need of our current time is enabling, collaborative, and compassionate women's leadership. In another initiative is a series of meditations reflecting a virtual United Nations meditation room, which was created on the theme of Karuna, a compassionate response to the coronavirus. And these resources are available to you on our YouTube channel, the BKUN YouTube channel. So these are some of the things that we've been doing as Denise was saying, to touch on those inner resources that we have, these qualities, these values, and these spiritual virtues of the soul, of the innate being, that when we focus on those and bring them out, it gives us an opportunity to bring this spiritual strength and power into our hearts, into our lives, and into our actions, so that we can shift this attitude and actions that are so prevalent in the world and that cause so much violence against women. So thank you very much, and it's lovely to be with you all today. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you so much, Julia, for reminding us about the Brahma Kumaris being a women-led organization, and how many of us realize who have been doing this work that in part with eliminating violence against women goes in hand the ability of women to contribute to society at all levels, including in positions of power and leadership, not only in the political sphere, but also in the corporate sector and in the not-for-profit sector, the NGO sector, so across the board. And this idea of women in leadership, a lot of the research shows that when women are in positions of leadership, not only do women focus on a lot of the softer kind of issues, such as health, education, shelter and food, those kinds of things, but women actually invest in not only women and girls, but create societies that are better for everyone across the board. So men and boys benefit too from the kinds of policies and programs that women leaders, the majority of them, are advocating for and actually pass and resolve. I also want to thank you for bringing us back to, again, who we are, what our true essence is, how we have these inner resources that sometimes we completely forget and take us out of that realm of being a human person. So thank you for bringing that up again and for announcing the special program on Tuesday. And if people are interested, be in touch with Julia or feel free to contact any one of us and we can provide you with the information. At this time, I just have been noticing that we have so many people joining us. And it's interesting because I have here that we have over 420 people are joining us on the Facebook live stream. So thank you for spending some time today with us. I want to just acknowledge some of our strong male partners. Ambassador Chabala, again, he has been such a support for us as women. Jean Trudel, one of our executive committee board meetings of the Yoga Day Committee. Thank you for joining us and also for helping to put it on our live stream Facebook page too. We appreciate you and we appreciate that. Gabriel Martinez, thank you for all the efforts that you're always giving us all the time with these events that Guruji is hosting. We value your support and your friendship and your partnership. And another partner is someone who many of us know for years in the UN community. One, Buddhism has had such a strong impact in the work of the UN, particularly around the World Summit, when we talk about social policy and social development and working very closely with Juan Samovia, who is head of the ILO. And really, I think bringing these values, we can call them yogic values, but I think that they're the values that Julia alluded to, the inner resources that we, you know, if we go deep down, we really find inherent to us in our deep soul. So I was, again, privileged to be with Monica, to go to Seoul, Korea with Won Buddhism in the Reverend Doyan Park, to really help bring some of these spiritual values to the light of thought leaders who were having a G20 summit meeting there. And we worked on a special document that dealt with, you know, the importance of investing in women and girls and why women matter, why it's important to really take a look at equity and equality for women and girls. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the Reverend Doyan Park. You have the floor.
Okay, hi, greetings to you all. First of all, I also want to thank Guruji and Denise for bringing all of us together today. I feel so much of kind of inspiration just looking all of your faces, and I feel so honored to call my great colleagues and friends, because also my special gratitude for all the speakers that we heard today. because I know you're not just talking about it. I know that you've been really working hard to make this gender-based violence to end in this world. So my deepest gratitude goes out to all of you who have been working so hard. And then having this type of gathering, again, just seeing all of my great colleagues and friends, and just knowing there are so many people out there see this value and working together, it's a great kind of relief and inspiration. Sometimes seeing all the problems that we have in this world, we can be easily overwhelmed. Sometimes that's my case, but then just again looking all people around us, because we're doing this together. You know, I, as an individual, within the One Buddhist community, we cannot do this. We must work together. So I really appreciate all of your work and your inspiration. And today I'm here to offer a short prayer from the One Buddhist tradition, and I will also share a short chant practice. So, way to introduce our practice and also connect in our spirituality. Wherever we are, I think one other thing that I find great joy in this journey is that we all have this strong spiritual foundation, and I also really appreciate for that. If you feel comfortable, you may join your palms together. Otherwise, you can just stay, maybe bring your awareness into your next in-breath. The Dharmakaya Buddha for forward grace. May the grace of heaven and earth watch over us. May the grace of parents nurture us. May the grace of fellow beings embrace us. May the grace of Dharma cultivate us. We have gathered here with our hearts enjoined to celebrate the International Day for the Elimination of Violence against Women and Girls. And we are here to renew our commitment to prevent and end gender-based violence. With each breath, may we free our minds from discrimination and injustice. Returning to our breath, we feel one another's presence and peaceful support. We pray that everyone becomes emboldened in heart to see the path that leads to love and peace. May we be enabled and empowered by inner strength, inspiration, and motivation as one family within one house. May we all come together in solidarity to help and support one another by realizing that we cannot make justice and peace without collective effort. With great courage and steady practice, may we restore our divine nature through spiritual cultivation and bring gender equality and harmony through the collaboration. We pray with one mind and one heart. Now I would like to offer a short Korean chanting, and here the English translation goes like this. We call the Yeongju spiritual chant. Divine energy of the universe fills my mind. Everything communicates with my divine energy. I become one with the universe. Together with the universe, I build justice and peace for all. 천지연기야 심정 만사여야 심통 천지여와 동일체 아여 천지 심정 천지연기야 심정 만사여야 심통 천지여와 동일체 아여 천지동심정 천지연기야 심정 만사여야 심통 천지여와 동일체하여 천지동심
Thank you, Reverend Doyan, with such a beautiful special prayer that you created for us today, and a powerful chant and a beautiful slide for us to focus on. So thank you for all your effort and energy into that. I also want to bring up a word that you used that just struck me as you were speaking. You used the word courage, and I'd like to acknowledge all of those women human rights defenders around the world who have so many death threats against them, and those who lost their life in the promotion and the defending of their human rights and the rights of so many women and girls, or even the environment and land. We know that this is something that is getting even more and more pressing today. And I'd just like to take a moment of silence to acknowledge our Indigenous sisters, but also all of those human rights defenders. Thank you. So someone who is working to create a better world and promote a culture of peace and nonviolence has been with us on this journey for many, many years and is part of this circle too. And I'd like to introduce now Martha Gallagher, who's with the URI and who's really spearheaded a lot of the URI UN Zoom calls since COVID-19 happened. Thank you for being with us, Martha, today. The floor is yours. Please unmute.
Thank you, everyone, for offering this opportunity. I want to single out the URI people who have contributed to this mightily. Morgana Selo, who is on the Board of Trustees at URI, Denise, Guruji, Monica, and myself. What a delight to see a program like this happen. And I see our time is coming to a close. I wanted to share as a URI person involved with the UN and focused on the culture of peace, my own hat as a psychoanalyst. And I wanted to have a couple of things in my head. First of all, to give a shout out to the 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325, which calls for leadership in areas of conflict for women. And this is to highlight what many of you have said before, how much the UN is actually quietly building bridges through resolutions and commitments, and they're laying the groundwork for the new civilization, at which you all have addressed so well. From the perspective of a psychoanalyst, one tends to think of the causes and cures. And so in looking to all violence, one needs to look within in order to trace where are the roots of it and what does it, how can we own that, first of all, in our own hearts as we release it and in the transformative resolution of it. So it occurred to me, perhaps as an exercise, we could begin to think of ourselves from the standpoint of the perpetrator, of the victim, and of the healer. And so we can look within and we can say, I know what it is to be agitated. I know what it is to be dissociated. I know what it is to be in such a state of low self-esteem that I flash out at others and I hurt others. I know what it is to cut off my heart so that I don't have to look at the damage that I sometimes cause. I understand that even the small things can be part of the big things. I can own the history of my own violence in my own family that has gone through generations. Because as an American, we justified corporal punishment for children. And I know how much harm comes from the standpoint of entitlement. And once I have owned that, the heart and mind of a perpetrator is not so foreign to me that I can't look at it with a clear eye and the willingness to speak compassionately truth to power, not angrily. When I look at myself as a victim, I know the state of inadequacy and helplessness when I have been hurt. I carry around in my own body some injuries that have taken place in my own childhood. I understand my inability to distance from my abuser because of my dependence and because of the circumstance in which I live, where I don't always know what I am entitled to and what I must learn to fight for. I know in myself the times when I've become a victim because I was sleeping. I wasn't paying attention to the circumstances in which I was around. I know myself as a healer, as one who can identify with both perpetrator and abuser, and finds that center place where compassion and forgiveness shines through. I'm proud of my daughter, Doctor, who wrote a book, Emergency Care of the Abused, and spoke about the little girl, 13-year-old pregnant girl from Guatemala, who was overlooked in the emergency room as a person who'd been trafficked. I'm proud of her that she has left that up and did not distance herself from the perpetrators who caused so much harm. The healer suffers every time we hear the stories of abuse, because most healers have themselves experienced something which causes that. The driving energy to seek resolution comes from the pain in their own experience. Healers also know greater healers than themselves, like the person who was tortured in Robben Islands and encountered his perpetrator after he was released and looked at him and said, "He's only a man." Pain, suffering, anguish is in our hands. We're grateful to having such institutions as the United Nations that can set resolutions to change the course of these things. We're grateful to the heroes who have given their lives to the languaging of change, as we find in the document of the culture of peace, that speaks to the universal values that you've all spoken to. We appreciate that. The healer takes a position that sees it all, does not deny it, but as was said here, exposes it, owns it, possesses it so that it can be released. And what are the cures? What are the cures of violence? We've said about it before. All of us are giving ourselves to build cultures of dignity, of value. I am grateful to my own religion, humanism, that sees the infinite inherent worth of every living thing. I see healing and I see the cure, not only in the change of culture, but in the capacity we have to build systems based upon trust, transparency, and even friendship. So for us, those of us here, the act of eliminating violence is a personal thing when we promote the rights of the child, or multilateralism, or the financial resources to take care of those who have been so impacted by COVID. Let us imagine, let us visualize ourselves in this common field of workers where we are dedicated to the light. Imagine ourselves as a channel for the light to increase by owning what we are inclined to disown, to see clearly the laws of compassion and forgiveness, and to activate into larger fields of goodwill, the activation of kindness, of tolerance, of patience. Love is the incentive for goodness, ahimsa. Love is the substance of our living in the world. Love is the light and height of freedom. Love pulses through the universe in divine rhythm. Love is the consciousness of God. We are the light bearers of consciousness. Thank you, everyone.
Martha, thank you for bringing it back to the whole idea of healing, because at the end of the day, all of the laws, all of the policies and programs that are in effect is really about healing and how we as men and women can heal our relationship between the sexes and between even greater amounts of sexes now with LGBTQI and so many other things. How can we really go beyond the boundaries of what this categorization of sex is about? And how can we go deep to the real dignity that each person brings through this incarnation? How can we see the essence of one's humanness and respect that, to see that beauty, and then to help to bring that out to blossom even further? There are many, many, many mechanisms that we can speak about when we talk about violence against women. We alluded to some of them. You've heard them, the 16 days, the CEDAW Treaty. You know, we could go on and on and on. If you're interested, please email us, be in contact with us. We can let you know more. But our time is short and we are over time. So I regret that we're not able to call on other people to get comments. And I'd like to really now share us as we come into this space to turn inward. I'd like to introduce someone who has been so involved with the work of the UN for decades, someone who has been so insightful in all of the work and the way the work at the UN happens, someone who has been promoting values, dignity, and the spirit of harmony, unity, and wholeness for many years. She's the vice chair of the International Day of Yoga Committee at the UN, someone who's been involved with the UN Brahma Kumaris UN office for 40 years, someone who I am so proud to say is a personal friend and mentor, Gayatri Naraine. Gayatri, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Denise, and thank you, Guruji, whom I call Dileepji, because he's my brother. I tied him, the bond of brotherhood, the Rakhi, and friends. Martha, that was so beautiful. You almost took me on a journey, and so I thought that should have been the reflection that ended it. But my role is to take you into a reflection. But I just like to set a little context of the reflection I'm going to do, because I think violence against one woman is violence against all women. And where is it we go to draw strength from, to get a solace, to heal our own selves before we can even extend a hand of help to another woman, because we know what that violence does to an individual, and so the same would be experienced by any individual experiencing that violence. In 1936, when the founder of the Brahma Kumaris surrendered all his material wealth to a group of 8 women and created a trust, which became the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University, he set in motion a paradigm shift. This shift was very subtle. It was a very subtle one, as these women were referred to as Shiv Shaktis. Shakti is the feminine form of God's power. And so today, as I reflect on the elimination of violence against women, I find myself contemplating on this word Shakti, but particularly the Shakti connected to a goddess called Kali. And I was looking at the core strengths of Kali, and because I wanted to create my reflection around this. For me, violence against women is so insidious that it can take lifetimes to repair the damage that it does to a woman's worth and dignity. To repair and heal this insidious damage done to her, let's reflect on some of Kali's core strengths. So I invite you to turn within and to connect to that Shakti within you, a Shakti that's referred to as the core strength of the soul, a strength that comes from the source. Kali's Shakti, her spiritual power, removes the shackles of injustices and inequalities and breaks the control imposed on her by anyone and anything. She embodies the boundless and existential freedom to be herself without seeking permission, trying to please, or bowing under pressure. Her courage rises with a fearlessness that is awe-inspiring. She is most pleased when her impact penetrates the fears and opens up courage in the hearts of her fellow women. She's comfortable confronting her deepest fears and is not bothered whether she's liked or not, criticized or praised. Kali epitomizes a feminine strength, very different from the norms that are so readily imposed on women. The norms of being dutiful to policies that discriminate, submissive to a power that dehumanizes, and obedient to laws that are man-made. She is a feminine icon, a complex figure of so many contrasting traits. Demure, and determined, graceful and grotesque, benign and brave, reserved and radical. The powers of creation and destruction rest with her. She possesses a silence of profound depth and a tongue that sets the world on fire. This is the fire of love, a love that purifies, that heals, that unites. May all women reconnect to the Kali in their souls and recognize that the only power to conquer violence is the Shakti power, the power of Kali within. Kali is the ultimate protector against evil and violence. And what the world needs now are women, women who embody Shakti. Om Shanti. Greetings of peace. Let us all thank ourselves, thank our sisters and women all over the world for being women. Because what the world needs now is the leadership of women. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, thank you so much for that inspiration so that we can take that going forward as we move not only in our day-to-day, but as we move forward in this week and in these times. We are actually over our time, but I do want to thank some people who have been writing in, and Kirpal Singh particularly for sending in so much beautiful information. Thanks to all of our speakers who have shared from their perspective, the knowledge, but also their experience and insight, and their passion and dedication for all these years. I want to thank you, each and every one of you who are joining us today, either with Zoom or on the live stream. And it's my great pleasure to turn it back over to Guru Dileep for the final vote of thanks and farewell.
May I also acknowledge my sisters, URI sisters, Salette and Heidi, who are part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Really, I am starting my Thanksgiving dinner with this event. So much to hear from all of you. And I know a lot of you are at the UN before I came to the UN. I'm so glad we made this event. I just, with my enthusiasm, I told Denise, oh yeah, we'll do it. But I didn't think this will come like this beautiful. You know, I'm so happy. We made something for the people. Over 600 people are watching now this event. At least we can share our ideas, our experience to people through online programs, you know, even this COVID time. I want to all of you to pray for our sisters and brothers. For future, they should work together. This is the 21st century. We have to help each other. Life is so beautiful when we work together. We may have different opinions, different ideas, but in spiritual level, we all are equal. We may coming from different countries, or we have different language, sometimes we cannot understand what we are thinking about. So we had to do really hard work. All the NGOs come together. This is the way I love it. Just be little time with you and enjoy the time. Precious, beautiful, divine time with my brothers and sisters. I just enjoy it. And I know Monica was asking to play the shell. Usually I want to avoid it this evening, but because of our request, definitely I'll play. I know that is from the blessing from Sami Bua. It will help us. I never hear from Sami Bua calling a female as their name. He always called them Amma. Even if it's a child or an elderly person or his same age or younger than him, always called Amma. This is the way we grew up. I know so many Indians misbehave towards females. I will say sorry for them. So they had to educate themselves.